Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. The lap of honor Narendra Modi took earlier this week in a cricket stadium in Ahmedabad has not just been the focus of enormous attention, it's also attracted equal measures of criticism, controversy, and even derision. In a stinging article in this morning's Calcutta paper, The Telegraph, the well-known and highly regarded historian and commentator Ram Guha has called it hubris personified. Joining me now to talk about his views and explain them further is Ram Guha himself. Ram Guha, you've written an article in today's Calcutta newspaper, The Telegraph, called Hubris Personified, about the manner in which Narendra Modi and the BJP's attempt to project Modi's personality hijacked the India-Australia cricket match presently underway in Ahmedabad. Let's start with that almost unbelievable lap of honor the two prime ministers took. In your eyes, was this fitting and suitable, or did it remind you of Roman emperors and their grandiose processions?
Well, fortunately or otherwise, I didn't live during the time of Roman emperors, but this is certainly unprecedented in the history of the modern world, Not just our country, Karan, but if you could look at countries around us. For example, I mentioned in my article that there have been such sports venues in the past named after living leaders like Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, but one does not know whether they ever went on a lap of honor like that. So it's certainly unprecedented, spectacular, and I should add, gross and distasteful.
Okay. In a 2004 written judgment, Justices Duraiswamy Raju and Arijit Pasayat called Modi a modern-day Nero. At the Ahmedabad Stadium earlier this week, he seemed to live up to that description. But how do you think Prime Minister Albanese felt standing beside him?
Well, he would have been squirming, embarrassed. If you look at the footage, Modi is, as usual, waving enthusiastically to a captive audience, and we'll come to how that audience was captured perhaps later in the show. And his counterpart is embarrassed, and when Modi nudges him, kind of tentatively waves a hand. I think he would have been not happy with it, but perhaps thinking of the trade deals that might come his country's way if he flatters his host enough. So he would have suppressed any qualms he might have felt in the interests of Australian corporations.
In other words, to misquote what Victorian mothers would tell their daughters when they got married, lie back and think of England, darling. And Prime Minister Albanese would have said to himself, put up with this, think of Australia.
Well, I think more of the Australian trade and Australian business, not necessarily about all of Australia, because as you know, some Australians themselves have been very critical of what happened in the Ahmedabad Stadium.
I'll come to that in a moment's time because I think that's a very important part of my discussion with you today. But let me first point out, in your article, you point out Narendra Modi's close connection with this stadium in Ahmedabad. It stretches back to 2009, in the days when the stadium was actually named after Vallabhbhai Patel. In 2021, the stadium's name was changed and it now is called the Narendra Modi Stadium. For those who haven't had the benefit of reading your article in today's Telegraph, can you share with us some of the fascinating details of the connection between Narendra Modi and this stadium in Ahmedabad?
Absolutely correct. So in September 2009, Narendra Modi was elected president of the Gujarat Cricket Association. In November 2009, that is shortly after Modi assumed this cricketing office, so-called cricketing office, there was a test match at the Sardar Patel Stadium in Ahmedabad, in which the great Sachin Tendulkar was playing. And this marked 20 years of Sachin's career in international cricket. And there was a felicitation organized for him, at which Modi, probably knowing Modi, did the honors because he wanted to, and maybe even insisted to. And he wanted to be associated with Tendulkar. In 2009, Sachin Tendulkar was a much greater brand name and household name than Narendra Modi. So he didn't have selfies in those days, but he wanted live television coverage. Modi wanted television coverage, so that somehow Sachin's glamour and glow rubbed off on him. That is 2009. Fast forward 4 years, 2013, and Modi now decides to associate himself with the person after whom that stadium was named, Sardar Patel, and in the campaign trail talks about how Patel was neglected by the Congress party, how he should have been prime minister, and so on and so forth, and how he's a great Indian. Patel was a great Indian whom Modi is proud to be associated with and do something to restore his place in Indian history. That's in 2013. By 2021, Modi has not only outgrown Tendulkar, but outgrown Patel, and is happy enough to have the Sardar Patel Stadium named after him. Now, I mean, what kind of person would do this firstly to himself, in your own lifetime, to have this extraordinary act of vanity and narcissism, displayed? Obviously, it was the work of his acolytes, probably the work of the Home Minister Amit Shah, who knows better than anyone else the extent of Mr. Narendra Modi's self-love, and the need to flatter it and placate it and humor it. But the fact that it was Patel's name that he was erasing, happily, comfortably erasing in favor of his own name, I think tells you a great deal about the man and how instrumental he is. Not only how narcissistic he is, but how instrumental he is, because Patel is no longer useful to him.
Let's at this point, and against that background, come to the impact of this political event, the grandstanding by the two prime ministers, orchestrated no doubt by the Indian prime minister, has had on genuine cricket fans. Because after all, it happened in a cricket stadium on the first day of a cricket match between India and Australia, something millions of fans in both countries were waiting and wanting to see. So to begin with, tickets, I gather, were denied to cricket fans during that first day so that Modi Bhaks could be fitted into the stadium instead. And Peter Laylaw, writing in The Australian, has complained about this. How upsetting is it that cricket fans lost out and politicians, for their vain glory, got their place and their position?
And that's deeply upsetting. And it's also upsetting that it took an Australian writer to point this out. This was well known among Indian cricket writers, but no Indian cricket journalist or cricket website had not just the courage, but the decency to write about it. Because if you write on cricket, your first obligation is to the fan, not to the BCCI, let alone the BJP or the Prime Minister. And once Peter Laylaw wrote about it, and it became a diplomatic embarrassment, and the 1,000-odd Australian fans who had traveled here from down under could not get tickets for the first day of the Ahmedabad test. Maybe the Foreign Office intervened, something had to be done. A booth was opened to them where the Australians had to show their Australian passport to make sure they're not Indians, because Indians were being denied tickets. This blew up on social media, and Indian fans started protesting, including some Indian fans from Gujarat, as it happens. And this embarrassed the organizers to then releasing more tickets. We don't know the quantum, but more tickets for the first day. But the majority of tickets were certainly kept for Modi Bhaks, because this was meant to be a political rally to show specifically the Gujarati devotion to their great hero. And I think it's an absolute scandal that cricket fans were treated like this way. And it's a secondary scandal that cricket journalists in India, newspapers, magazines, dedicated cricket websites did not pick this up.
In fact, it's that last point I want to pick up and dwell on a bit. As you point out, Australians complained about lack of tickets for genuine spectators. Indian fans themselves complained on Twitter. They were pretty vociferous about it. But the cricket media in India was silent. And actually, they should have been the first to complain. What accounts for this depressing, distressing silence?
Well, the cricket media, like the rest of the media, is spineless. Their bosses tell them not to write against the government. The BCCI is now effectively the arm of a ruling party. If you write anything critical, you may be denied a press pass for the next test match. I don't know what is going through their minds. But I went 4 or 5 days, a week before the Ahmedabad test was starting, when a fan alerted me that tickets were not available and sent me a screenshot of the website saying tickets not available for the first day. I sent that screenshot to more than one cricket writer and editor. And I said, please write about this. And they did. So that is why I wrote about it. And that's why the Australians wrote about it. Because the people who should have been writing about it, Indian cricket journalists who claim to be serving the Indian cricket fan, betrayed their colleague. And Karan, if I may add a little more, even more distressing than the behavior of the cricket journalists was the behavior of the cricket commentators in the BCCI box. And someone like Sunil Gavaskar, whom one greatly admired for the courage with which he took on the West Indian fast bowlers, being silent about this. To the contrary, on the day when Modi made this spectacular entry and this lap of honor, Sunil Gavaskar was sycophantically praising Jay Shah, who's his current boss and to whom perhaps he owes his contract. I mean, how could a man stoop so low? A great cricketer who had the physical courage to stand up to the most fearsome fast bowlers of his time without a helmet has absolutely no moral courage at all. He's only looking out for himself, doesn't care about the cricket watching community. So it's truly tragic, this capitulation of cricket writers, broadcasters, former cricketers to the BCCI is unprecedented in the history of Indian cricket.
There are two things that you've said that I want to pick up on. How distressing, or importantly, how disillusioning is it that an icon for many, Sunil Gavaskar, should have ended up being a commentator who, to use your words, is sycophantic of Jay Shah, who had nothing to say about the fact that Indian and Australian cricket lovers and fans were denied tickets on the first day so that politicians could glorify in a lap of honor. How distressing and how disillusioning is Gavaskar's behavior?
Well, I think it's Gavaskar. I single him out because he's the greatest. But other commentators, Harsha Bogle, Sanjay Manjarekar, Ravi Shastri are equally culpable. Cricket journalists, and I say this, Karan, some of your viewers will know that apart from being a historian, I'm also a cricket fan and I've written books on cricket. I passionately love the game. And I understand the sentiments of fans like myself. They want fair description, fair analysis, and they want their interests and concerns and passion to be represented. Now, if the best known Indian commentators are absolutely supine and betray the fans in the interest of keeping their contracts and pleasing their bosses, it's depressing. But I'd say it's also symptomatic of the Indian media in general, which is why in my article, I adapted the phrase Godi media and said there's a Godi cricket media. So you know better than me the state of the mainstream Indian media when it comes to frank and independent criticism of what the Modi regime does. And the cricket media has followed in the same way.
You've actually preempted the second question I wanted to ask when you used the term Godi cricket media, because that was precisely what I was going to ask you. Has the term Godi now extended from political and economic journalists to sport journalists as well?
Yes, and possibly business journalists too. I mean, if you look at how much open criticism there was in the mainstream media, objective analysis of the Adani scandal. There may have been some smaller websites like The Wire and Scroll, but the mainstream newspapers, the TV channels, the fact that someone who is India's richest man has half his wealth shaved off in a manner of days surely should be the subject of scrutiny, analysis, not polemics, but serious analysis. But of course, there was none of that. So there's a Godi business media. There's probably a Godi foreign policy media, which takes its handout from the MEA and just reproduces them blindly. That's the state of our Indian media today, and that is truly depressing.
Clearly, the media likes sitting on the lap of those who are important. But let me come to a second aspect of this rather sorry spectacle, and I'm using that word deliberately, that was staged in Ahmedabad just a couple of days ago. This lap of honor and the presentation of photographs that followed was arranged by Jay Shah, who is a very senior secretary in BCCI. He also happens to be our Home Minister Amit Shah's son. Was it right for the Board of Control for Cricket in India to involve itself with what was clearly a political event and by no means part of a cricket test match?
So, and even they should have pushed back at least a little. You know what it is like, Karan. If you get an order from the PMO and you're worried that if you don't follow it, the electricity to the stadium will be cut off, water supply will be cut off. You know how vindictive this regime is. But I'll just give you one example. You will recall that after this rather bizarre lap of honor, or just before it, I think, there were some photographs presented. One to the Australian Prime Minister and one to Narendra Modi. Now, this should have been an opportunity to bring cricket into it. So, for example, if Narendra Modi had been presented a photograph, a nicely mounted photograph of the great Australian spinner Shane Warne, and if Narendra Modi had been presented that, and if the Australian Prime Minister had been presented an elegantly framed photograph of the great Indian batsman Sachin Tendulkar, the politicians would have been educated about cricket. The great rivalry between Warne and Tendulkar, the finest batsman of his age and the greatest spin bowler of his age, is legendary and epic. Now, that would have been a way to bring cricket into what was otherwise a political tamasha, also to tell the politicians what this is about. Instead of which, Modi was presented with a photograph of Modi at the Modi Stadium, because I think, as I said, that is what Jay Shah and his father know Modi would like most of all. He would regard a photograph of Warne probably as an insult presented to him. But that would be inappropriate. Warne to Modi, Tendulkar to Albanese. That would be in the spirit of Indian and Australian cricketing contests and rivalries, right? So I think at least there the BCCI should have had the sense. Why not Warne? Why Modi to Modi? Why not Warne to Modi? Or Tendulkar to Modi? Or Bradman to Modi, for God's sake? There could be so many other interesting options to make it less distasteful, less vulgar, less obscene. But, Modi's self-love had to be gratified, whatever happens.
In your article, you are also sharply critical of the fact that this event was staged in Ahmedabad. You say, given the importance of an India-Australia cricket match, it should have been staged in Calcutta or Chennai or Mumbai. Ahmedabad was the wrong venue. Why do you say that?
Because Ahmedabad has got several test matches in the recent past. And normally these rotate. Calcutta has not got a test match in more than 3 years. Bangalore in more than 2 years. Chennai in 2.5 years. And these are major cricketing centers, and with larger, more discerning crowds, and with a much greater cricketing history. It's like, why is a test match always played at Lord's or at Manchester or in Australia, Sydney, and in Melbourne? I mean, they don't give a test match to Darwin or Alice Springs, for God's sake, even if the Prime Minister came from there. So you would have that. So I think, and especially because the Ahmedabad gets a test every series. Because Jay Shah wants it, Amit Shah wants it, Modi wants it. No other reason, not for cricketing reasons, right? So, and also in this case, as I argue in my article, could Modi and his henchmen have organized this spectacular display of narcissism, sycophancy on one side and narcissism on the other, in Calcutta under Mamata Banerjee? No. In Chennai under Stalin? No. Not even in my hometown Bangalore, which is ruled by the BJP. Could 50,000 Kannadiga cricket fans have not been denied tickets? Would they have stood for it? But the Gujarat, fine. You can, write roughshod about everything because it's your god, it's your territory. So I think it's striking. It also shows, Karan, a certain insecurity in Narendra Modi. One of my friends who was at the stadium said, such a powerful man and so insecure, still wanting more attention. And this same person today sent me a photograph which I'll share with you after we are done, of the discarded chariot. It's been used, and Mr. Modi has no more time for it. It's in a corner of the stadium. So, it shows that despite his power and his fame and his influence and his authority, he is still so insecure that he needs this consistent gratification. Let me make one last point, Karan. His party members recognize this. That every week in one Delhi newspaper or the other, the Times of India or the Hindustan Times or the Indian Express, there's an article by a serving cabinet minister praising Narendra Modi. Now, what got lost in the din and clamor about that tamasha in Ahmedabad is that on the same day, Devendra Fadnavis, in a speech in the Maharashtra Assembly, announced that 2 state schemes would be named after Narendra Modi. Now, this is only reported in the Deccan Herald, not in other papers. Now, so this is what the man demands. It shows the extraordinary insecurity. It's like a child wanting more and more birthday presents. I don't know what to compare it to. So it's really, very, very strange.
Now, in India, there's no doubt that many people were enthralled both by the lap of honor and the incredible roar of approval from the stands for Prime Minister Modi. My question is, how would all of that have been received in Australia? Because they were watching it live as well.
Well, I don't think it is India. It is Gujarat, and it is a captive audience. Now, let Mr. Modi repeat that experiment in Calcutta next time. When the English team or the Australian team comes, let him say, I'm going to have and let Mamta Banerjee or whoever's chief minister allow it, and let's see what the crowd does. Right. So it is Gujarat. He is, akin to a semi-divine figure. I understand that. But it's not true of the rest of India. And of course, as you say, in Australia, I wonder what they were making of all it. Not just Australia. I urge your viewers to look at the report by the Guardian's cricket correspondent on that first day, which begins by saying, an eagerly awaited test match began with a bizarre political rally. And the word was bizarre. So clearly anyone with any objectivity or sobriety or independence who saw what happened would have been dismayed by it.
So
they would have treated it as a great celebration.
In a nutshell, the world is, to put it politely and euphemistically, befuddled, but to put it honestly, they're not impressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, one last question. Usman Khawaja, who almost scored a double century on that first day of the match, which began with the 2 prime ministers watching, was initially refused a visa by the Indian government, and as a result, he couldn't travel with the Australian cricket team when they arrived in India on the 1st of February. I'm told it was only after the Australian Cricket Administration protested that Khawaja got his visa. This is what Malcolm Conn writes in the Sydney Morning Herald. The BJP sees, and now I'm quoting Conn, Khawaja not as one of Australia's finest cricketers, but as a Muslim born in Pakistan. So on top of the incredulity, or maybe even shock and horror, that the lap of honor would have created in Australia, is there also real anger about the treatment of Khawaja, who after all is an Australian citizen and a proud member of Australia's cricket team?
I hope there is in India, and I think I'm glad that Malcolm Conn said the BJP. He didn't say Indians, or he didn't say Indian cricket fans. The BJP's pathological hatred of Pakistan, its Islamophobia, its narrow-minded perspective on religion, its majoritarianism is well known. And I think Khawaja is a fine cricketer. He played very impressively. And to hold up his visa was an act of spitefulness. It shows India in very poor light. Not the BJP, not Modi, but you and me as Indians. That our country would hold up someone's visa, even though he's an Australian citizen. I think, in my view, Pakistani cricketers should be allowed to play in India. And I hope they come for the World Cup, because cricketers are not, terrorists. Cricketers don't represent their government. They just play a sport. So it was a vicious and spiteful act. And in some ways, given all that went on, it's poetic justice that it was Khawaja who scored 100 and not one of the other 10 Australians.
Out of all fairness, I should point out that the British newspaper The Guardian reports that exactly the same thing happened to Khawaja in 2011, when, as you know, the Manmohan Singh government with a Congress majority was in power. So sadly, this treatment of Khawaja, because he was born in Pakistan, now is an Australian citizen, has a tradition behind it. We've been doing it
and it shames
over
us.
10
It
years.
shames us. I mean, the spitefulness of the BJP now and that of the Congress in 2011 under Manmohan Singh shames us. It belittles us. It makes us smaller as a country, as a civilization, as a democracy. And I think we should learn to be more generous in these matters and more humane in these matters.
I should point out that any Pakistani who has double nationality, if they wish to come to India, are not permitted to apply under their English, Australian, or French citizenship. They have to apply under their Pakistani citizenship, and the rules require that you will not get your visa until it is specifically cleared by India. And in India, I believe it is the Home Ministry. So, in other words, the hold-up of Khawaja's visa happened directly by the Indian government, and most probably within the Indian government by the Home Ministry. That is the sad part. And that ministry comes under Amit Shah, whose son, Jay Shah, is the BCCI secretary and should have been saying to his father, you can't hold up his visa. It creates the wrong impression of the country. Yet that communication between father and son didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I don't know whether Khawaja has dual citizenship, but I'm glad, I'm glad he came. I'm glad he scored 100. And I'm glad now the focus can be on the cricket and away from the misuse and the abuse of cricket for personal political glorification.
I'm told, and I'll deliberately end this interview on a humorous note, that when conquering Roman generals, not just emperors, but generals, would return to Rome, a grand procession was arranged to celebrate their victory. But as the crowds on the roadside roared their approval, there was always a slave behind the general, whispering into the general's ears, remember, one day you will die. And I'm told that the words in Latin are memento mori. It's very useful for the grand and the powerful to remember that one day this will end.
Absolutely.
Ram Guha, thank you very much for this interview.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.